Ta-da! And welcome to Josef's Model Railway and Toy Room. Girls and boys, ladies and gentlemen, I'd like to welcome you now to what is officially the commencement of the model railway. We should have some symbolic service where we're turning the sod over or breaking ground or what have you, but officially we are now going to commence with our wonderful model railway. You've been awfully patient waiting while we sort of got all the other things going on, and we can now finally get started. So we've got two loops. We've got faulty towers for the secondary loop, and here's our primary one, which the key focus scenery wise will be a cricket pitch in the middle, and we're trying to replicate the British TV sitcom Dad's Army, where they were having a round of cricket. I think we've got all the ingredients we need there to create that memorable sort of a scene where possible. But we need to start with the most complicated section of the layout, which is here. Because the other loop at the other end is just effectively two tracks that swing back off. But this is a little bit more different on this side. Yes, there's a third track, and this third track is the one where we're going to split the board, and it's going to trundle and have a cut and come in underneath, run under here, and then make its way down to the Fiddle Yard. However, the other two lines, which will be happening on the other side, will actually be a bit of an inclination. Now, it's not going to be much. There won't be any official unders or overs in the layout per se. The reason why I'm lifting them up, and I've worked it out, basically it's probably, if we just could bring a coach around for a moment here, from a height perspective and working on the fact there's track there, it's basically at the top of the little part of the level here. So we're not even as high as the actual coach itself. Now that becomes important for some scenery down the other end, where it's basically going to look like it's an overpass for where the cars are going to go. But nothing else really needs to happen. And I say that because this, once this section's done, this is going to take the longest. So the next couple of videos are just going to be this. The first one, we're talking about how this is all going to, what I've done now. Then I'm going to, I'll have my magic measurements, which is all where we're getting up to now. And then I'll be cutting the board, and I can start laying the ballast down and getting because this is, this track here is the Pico Streamline Flexi track, but we at the moment do also have the Hornby Setrack 4th radius. Now, once this is done, because this is going to be slow, so this might take a few weeks for us to get all this right, especially with that going down. Again, we can come back to all my notes and diagrams. In fact, let me just zoom up the picture officially here as you'll come in and see what we're looking at, where I basically had the idea that I can fit this onto the board with the loops that are required. And most importantly, the little calculation that we've worked out on a 2% gradient, we are going to chase down to that Fiddle Yard. So I need to make sure I'm basically maintaining that as we go around, and that's going to take a little bit of time to do. Also, as you would have noticed on that diagram there, I strayed a little bit from the original idea of the point work because it just wasn't looking right. It's still not quite the way I'd like it to look, but we have to be practical here. I'm not modeling on any real base location, and I just want it to flow and be playful and operational. So we don't have to get too bogged down into some semantics. Now, let us get started with the first thing that needed to be achieved. As you know, with these two loops, it's exactly the same on either side. And on the original diagram, I can have the first, second, third, and fourth in a continuous circle here, meaning it should fit. So yes, obviously because we're going to do some point work on this one, won't be on the other one, it takes up a little extra room, but the room is there to be used, so let us do that. But we need to, before we can do anything, before we can make cuts on the board, I need to get exact spots for where and what's going to happen. And especially when using the flex track, we need to get a little bit creative, so to speak, to try and make sure we're in the right place. Now, Hornby track plans and or understanding their rolling stock and the alike Certainly with a lot of their coaches, whether they're the LNERs or whether you've got your BR Intercities and the rest, often there's a lot of coaches that will make mention about second radius only and things like that. In other words, it's not going to be smooth operation for some things on tighter sections of track. Now, I've never had a problem, even though that's the case. We've got a first radius one here and it works. But of course, the key thing is, while it works, and I wouldn't have a problem doing it, but I've got the room, we may as well make the most of it. But I guess the key thing here is, while it may work, and I'm not running any complicated locomotives or anything like that on here, is that, we're just getting back on the track, is that when it's going, this really isn't looking, again, I'm not trying to be too accurate, but prototypical, even swinging down on the top of that camera, this is a heck of an angle we're actually carrying here. And as you can see, the overhang on the other side, it's not quite right. But it's not too bad. Again, we don't need to do it. I've got this is for radius 2, number 1. So my key thing for trying to get this, we need to find common ground. So the first thing is we've got to find the center. I found the center, and then I took first radius, second radius using the Setrack, and that's why I have these templates for second, fourth, and the third one is here. The whole idea is let's just lay them out and make sure it all fits, which it does. The next thing is, because there's a little bit of jig-er-ee poker for the one that we're going to have to cut to go down and under, and this one's going to be raised a little bit. So we want to make the most of the track. So if we just use the standard spacing, and if some of you may or may not be aware of the Pico weigh gauge here, it's very useful for this. You know, this in Australia I pay $5 for something like this, and I'm sure it's probably only like 50 cents everywhere else. We've got two key sizes. We've got the Setrack for the stuff that we have, and I think we've got a couple, this will flex. I've had a couple of Setracks just to do, and then we've got Streamline. So if we flip it over, you'll see that our Streamline ones fit in, give or take, because it's just roughly pinned down, but at least it gives us the idea that we can just get nice and tight, of which then I'll take the two wagons, I run them side by side, and nothing's going to brush or rub against. So we know that's why we've got them pinned down now. I finally got the formula worked out. And also you'll notice even here where I've written max and drawn a line, and I've got some room just to give it a little move in or out accordingly, as you can see. But if we swing a coach around here, and then the inner one here, and just bringing that wagon around now, you should be able to see that we've still got a reasonable amount of room there. And even though we're moving it at a fair rate, saying by the time it's all secured down and we've got the ballast laid, of course it's even going to be smoother again. But the whole idea, we need to just allow these tolerances is, should it be picking up pace or something from coming up, or something happens, we've got that bit of wiggle room to come across. You know, we have to allow for something. And particularly with the Setrack, that's why this becomes so important as we're going around. I'm constantly taking my measurements to make sure that I'm within that specification. So, as mentioned, the two lines we've got here are going to make a slight inclination, and we're going to start both the descension on the fourth radius, almost just basically after the point there, and then we're going to start and just get this gentle thing where you'll barely notice it. So we're going to go around with the jigsaw, cut the timber, and then we're going to allow that to sort of just bend in. There's a few notches I'll have to cut and allow for a little bit of wiring. Come back to that in a moment. The other section, this is obviously just going to gently start to rise, and we're only coming up to a height that's about 5.5 centimeters, which was where that was, so we'll call it about this high or thereabouts. But what it does is it creates that nice little thing where I could literally have what would look like a little tunnel opening, which is where the lawn mowers and the cricket players come into their little thing or something like that. We'll create a bit of, and it'll just be shrubs surrounding it, some trees and the usual sort of thing. Obviously, the elevation of the two tracks comes up, and we'll run for the most part around the rest of it to the other loop and then come back down again. You can see I've got some rudimentary measurements and some little markings here, which is basically as far as we're going to bring that top section, and then from there, of course, we can screen it off in the different scenery sections accordingly. Brick wall on some things, it'll just be trees and shrubs, and other things, the whole idea is I just want to camouflage the background up into the sky section, or the backdrop, so you don't even know it's there. There won't be anything fancy about it. It's raised. I can easily get to it, change it, clean track, do whatever may need to be done back there. Right, what a fantastic angle to get that camera into so you can really visualize what's happening. I've also just removed that first radius because it won't be getting used. So we've definitely got our 2 lines, and we've got our one trundling down to the Fiddle Yard and this point work, which I'll bring you in on in just a moment. The other thing is we can obviously see we've got our lines that are going to run around the back here that'll just keep tracing along. This will obviously straighten itself off again. A little bit of forestry is going here, and then bend its way around the corner, and away it goes. Got that hole in my sock. Oh dear, I should have changed socks. Anyway, so back to our original plan, what we were doing. We were toying with the idea of some points. The whole idea, we're going to have curved ones that back to back, and then a straight one that kept going. It just doesn't fit or work out. I have tried and tried again. This is the best possible combination I've been able to come up with. However, as you can see, and this may change a bit because we've got the flex track, certainly just coming off onto this one where we're splitting out to the Fiddle Yard, we're going to get the space required. We need to split the timber, and it's going one way and the other way, so we need to allow for a bit. So it's a little bit messy here. I might be able to smooth it up when it's done, but there's always going to be this little kick here. Now you'll notice there's a black line underneath. Now when I was originally just running some track across it, that was what was basically my baseline. I can't have anything closer or the coach is going to bump and crash into it. So that was where it was, my idea was originally going to happen, and then points were going to split off further down. Then I had a bit more of a think about it, and as you can see here where it comes out, the whole idea is the drawers run directly across here. So underneath here is nothing. We can get in and crawl from one end to the other end, and it's accessible. So the thinking here of bringing the points back just a bit, yes, it's not quite what I wanted here. It's cutting in a bit. And where I was going to put the signal box, we might have to reverse that. We'll deal with that as we come along. More importantly though, when I put these turnout motors in, everything is completely accessible directly underneath the board. There's no sort of disassembling and tricky places, which is definitely what I'm trying to avoid with the layout. Again, we've got 1, 2, 3 points in operation here. And this, again, this was just a bit of flex track at the time while I was jiggling things around. I just looked and said, I might be able to just sit a piece of Setrack perfectly in there, and away we go. Give or take, the important thing is this is the shape it's going to take. Right, so here we are with the first corner and a second corner down there, which will basically be identical. So the key thing is we've worked out what we need to do here, and again we're going to go this way. We did it with the flex track, which is where I obviously got my second and third set radius coming across, working out to where the minimum is. I actually used the first curve just to judge that for the absolute tightest, just to see if I was really benefiting in any way of getting more space from doing it. I didn't, so why don't we keep those nice large radii going so we can get a smoother flow. And obviously took it along, Setrack, taking the measurement across, and this is indeed, I've got my anchor set of where it needs to be here, and then we've taken them over here. Now I took it with the set ones, and then I've got the flex ones, and of course as you can see there, if we take our Pico Streamline track and put it here, this is exactly where it needs to match up. How it matches up from here as it sort of straightens up and comes in, that doesn't matter. But we need to go from here, we'll mirror it off from the same thing, which we can literally just take that exact distance and then replicate it here, which I'm very sure that's where those markings are, and lock it down. Likewise, at the back, we don't actually have to do too much at all. We are literally following where the track is being laid, and it'll dictate where we go. So, well, the good news is I did finally find those track cutters I mentioned in the previous videos. Although in this situation, I will probably do most of the cuts I need on the flex track using this particular Dremel tool with its appropriate cutting discs. Also, as mentioned before, I'm going to be using the Hornby DCC point clips. I have no problem with how they look. I certainly have no problem with how they perform. They're magnificent, and I think I'm just going to keep with the simplicity of what they are and slide them in as we get to that. Right, so we have our board with our measurements. So now it's time to head out the door to the chop shop. Yes, that is a beautiful day out here today. What a better place to be than out here in the shade, cutting up this magical board. So as you can see, we've made all these cuts now. I actually decided to leave that middle section. It'll be a reference point, so it'll sort of stagger as one goes up and then the other one's going down. But I think what we need to do, if we come in nice and close with the camera, it's not necessary, but I think I'm just going to buzz through with the sander now and just give it a bit of a sand and a clean up. And the biggest reason I'm doing that is just to minimize the dust that I'm carrying back and forth. So we'll give it a good clean up, and this section should be as we need it. Well, what a constructive day we've had. I was originally going to do the cut in a different video, but had a spare half an hour, so here we are. And I think, as you've seen, we've taken it out, we've made the cuts, we've sanded them back a bit, and I've just notched in the sections in the framework to have it just dropped in and sitting there. Now, of course, we're still going to need to do some fine tuning and adjustment as we go around, which will be where we're going to use our level. So obviously this was where the boards have been cut to here, even though you can barely see anything. But sure enough, let's just go on the upper slope at the moment. You probably can't see that, but it was coming up at 1.6 as we probably start climbing up. 0.6986. See that's 1.38, not too bad for an initial just shoving a piece of paper in here. That's not too bad at all. We're climbing nicely and we're getting not far off that height. Again, the upper one, there is no exact measurement we're chasing. However, we do need to maintain it about 2% on the way down. The good news is there's no set point to where we need to end up in that fiddle yard, other than I'm aiming for about 1 to 2 meters in. So give or take, we're going to be pretty good there. So let's just, again, all I've done is just sat it down. It's literally just satting down where I notched it. If you look here, I've got a bit of flexibility because this is where we're obviously going to need to attach to that lower section that'll be bolted and coming down the wall, which we'll see in another video. But let's pop it on for the minute. I'm glad I left this middle bit in a neutral position. I don't know what I'm going to do with it yet, but I sort of am glad it just gives a little more of a realistic approach. Again, the lower line coming up from the fiddle yard was never meant to be of any type of a feature. The feature is going to be here, where you've got the cricket pitch. This is sort of rising up around it with the line. This is where we're supposed to be looking. This was just a mechanical way of making it all happen. As much so that I may even do as part of sort of a mountainside or something here and it disappears off into a tunnel or what have you. I don't know, I'm open to suggestions. Now let us grab the level. I'm traveling down now. You probably can't see. I'm hitting 1.8 to about 1.9. Let's slide it around. Now we see a bit of a more dramatic drop here. 2.4. Keep going. We're at 2.5. Again, I can just lift that up like by a fraction. We're talking about just putting washers in. Remember, I still have all the fixtures, washers and brackets to secure the board in when we've got it where we want. So at the moment, all our boards are just loosely laid. We're still tracking around. Why don't I come around? 2, 3, again, a couple of washers will take that out. Now there's 1, 3. Are we getting that on the camera? Let me swing my head around. And yes, we are. So you can see that if anything, actually, we sort of level off as we hit that bracket there. So there's obviously that bow there. So we're going to reinforce that. But at least you get the idea that just for an initial plonk it into position, that really did turn out quite well. Girls and boys, ladies and gentlemen, yes, I did get that pen. I apologize that you saw that earlier in the video where I had to squiggle something on my hand. I'm not that kind of person, but there was nothing else I could do. So the next bit is, as we conclude now, we'll get these levels secured off, and I really just need to make sure I've got a baseline heading down to the fiddle yard, and then we'll start attaching where the this back line's going to run. We'll get the timber sat in there so we've got nice support, and we'll get carrying that on accordingly, and then we can start sort of fixing some track down and going from there. Thanks so much for watching. We'll see you in the next one. Stay safe. Toodles.